If you're going through a divorce, I guarantee you have got blogs and emails and different podcasts that you've listened to that have told you all the steps you're supposed to take to deal with your finances. But what they do is they give you theories. They don't give you the practical steps and actually what do you have to do. We're going to solve that problem today. I am talking with Sue Plisch, and she is the perfect expert to discuss this with us. So, Sue, before we even get started into anything else, let's talk about this whole idea of why do we have to have practical steps and strategies about our finances when we're going through divorce.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Marty. So, a lot of divorce is about the finances. Uh, if you think about it, apart from the children, and some people maybe don't have children or their children are grown, but apart from the children, finances are the big thing that needs to be resolved. It's not just dividing everything you own, dividing everything you owe, so your debts, but also thinking about the possibility of ongoing payments like maintenance and child support. And this impacts the rest of your financial future. So, um, not paying enough attention or not focusing on all the details, that can just result in, um, problems that last, for years to come. And so it's great to focus right in on those practical steps, things you can do right now, just to ensure you have that bright financial future.
Yeah, and this is why I think Sue is a great expert to talk about this. And Sue, before we get into any more details about this, just so people understand where you're coming from and why I think you're such a great expert about this, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do supporting people now.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So, my background is actually mathematics. So, I have a master's in math, and I've spent a decade teaching high school and college mathematics. I spent some time as a tax preparer. Then I went back to school and got my CFP. So, I'm a certified financial planner. And after experiencing my own divorce, I went back and earned the CDFA or Certified Divorce Financial Analyst credential. So I help people who are going through divorce just navigate those numbers, divide their assets, and calculate support.
And Sue, you work with both individuals as well as couples who are looking to create a divorce settlement that truly is equitable and fair for both parties involved. Is that correct? Both singles and couples?
Yes, that's exactly right. So if a couple is mediation minded and they're in mediation, I can serve as a financial neutral. Again, help them correctly value and think about different ways to divide things fairly. And then if someone maybe is working with an attorney, I can work on one side, and that work is called I'm working as an advocate or advocacy work. So I'm working for one side, again, helping them analyze options, maybe even craft a settlement proposal to give to the other side.
Yeah, and so I think this is really important because I hear so many people talking about finances and they don't really break it down and make it accessible for people. I do not have a master's in mathematics and I don't have any of the training that you have. And even though I've worked in the divorce industry, I've been a divorce mediator for many years, and I understand basics. There are some very specific practical steps that if people don't take or miss, that it's going to cost them a lot moving forward. And I know one of the things we've talked about in the past in our previous conversations is not having the actual numbers that you need to have. So let's talk a little bit about that practical step of needing to have the numbers that you need to have to make decisions from.
Yes, excellent. So I often tell people, like maybe when they're in the early stages or they've realized that, a divorce is heading for them, or that's the next step they need to take. I first recommend just collecting your financial documents. So usually you're going to need like 3 years of your past tax return. Oftentimes, you'll need recent statements from all of your accounts. So that could be a checking account, a savings account, a retirement account like an IRA or 401k, or even credit card statements. So any kind of financial account that you have, you're going to need to be able to produce recent statements.
And should you have that, do you need that information like when you first go to your attorney or when you first come to your CDFA? Let's focus on CDFA. When you first come to you, do you want your clients to come in with all of these documents, or what's the best way to do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a lot of times we'll start just by having a conversation so I can learn more about their situation, where things are headed. Are they mediating? Are they working with an attorney? Um, and then it's just the piece that they need help with. So sometimes I've helped people fill out what's called a financial affidavit. So a lot of times the mediator or the court or their attorney will want them to fill out a financial affidavit, which will be just a statement of everything that you own. So it could be like real estate, vehicles, all those accounts, checking, savings, brokerage, retirement accounts. And we would include, you know, any other property, or sometimes people have collections that could be worth some money, household furnishings. So you would list all that on there, but also a general listing of your expenses, like what are you paying for your mortgage or rent every month, those utilities, all those other things. And sometimes you would need, oops, oh, I'm so sorry. I am trying to turn my phone off.
We
We
can't
are
even
having
hear it. Don't, we
a
can't hear it.
tornado war, a tornado warning. Of course, I'm here in central Illinois,
Oh, there. Well,
but it's okay. I'm in the basement, so we're all good. Um, but yeah, you gotta love being in the Midwest
well, I'm
during
in Texas
tornado
and I've had
season.
them go off too every now and then. So yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. It's part of life.
Exactly, right. Um, so so yeah, so oftentimes you'll need to get that together, but oftentimes we just start with a conversation. And then usually I have a secure portal for collecting documents, and people can take a while, it depends where their case is at. Is their attorney wanting this yesterday, or is it
Yeah,
going to be 3 months before a hearing? And or if you need help collecting things, I'm there for you.
yeah.
So it just depends on, how quickly you need to get this together. So
So it sounds like a practical step is really to make sure you have the documentation. And if you're not sure what you're supposed to gather or get, to reach out to a CDFA like you used to and say, what do I need? Because that can be a little overwhelming, if because there's all kinds of things we don't necessarily think about, like life insurance and, subscriptions that we have and all kinds of services we now just automatically come out of our bank accounts and we don't even necessarily recall that we're paying them because it's an automatic withdrawal. Um,
yes.
I wouldn't have a clue when I'm paying for utilities because it's just comes out of my account. I mean, I know ballpark, but I certainly don't have any specifics on it. So, yeah. So, what's another practical step maybe that people need to take during the divorce when it comes to their money?
Sure. Another thing that I think is really important to do is check your credit report. And so there's annual creditreport.gov, or maybe it's .com, but that's a place where you can get your a free copy of your credit report. And sometimes unfortunately, there may have been financial infidelity in your relationship. What that means is perhaps your spouse took out loans in your name that you didn't know about, or just other things were happening. And so, if you get a copy of your annual credit report, you can just look at that and just see, what is out there, what debts, loans, credit cards are out there in your name. And it's just hopefully there's no surprises. That would be best case scenario, but sometimes there are surprises and you want to know about that as soon as you can, sooner rather than later.
That's a really, I again, another really, really good step. What about those free credit report things that, like, I know some credit cards will give you your FICO score, or, sometimes like different apps, different financial apps will give you a credit score. Can you use those, or do you have to actually get the copies from Equifax, TransUnion?
Yeah, I would say, Marty, that you need an actual copy of your credit report. So the score is sort of a different thing entirely. The score just says
Sure.
how credit worthy you are. So, for example, if you might need to rent an apartment, or maybe you need to get a credit card in your own name, or maybe you need to, I don't know, refinance the mortgage of your house, or I don't know, get a car loan. So that credit score just communicates to people who might be renting you an apartment or selling you giving you a loan, how trustworthy you are in terms of how likely you are to pay that debt back. But the annual credit report, that actual credit report, it lists exactly like, say the name, Chase credit card, and how much do you owe on that, or, mortgage, who's the lender, how much is that for? It just lists every single thing. And that's really what you need to look at.
Okay. So that's good. Don't rely on those apps and things. Get the actual reports from the credit bureau so you've got that information.
Yes, and just to clarify, that's annualcreditreport.com. You can
Okay.
get a copy for free. This is mandated by federal law. So, once a year, you can get a copy from each of the credit reporting bureaus for free.
And we're talking about the United States now. So if you're in
Yes.
Canada or England or any other country in the world, you'd have to check in with your whatever services you use there. And I'm sure every country's got some kind of similar system, although maybe not. I don't know. Um, Sue, what else? What about, oh, you mentioned something that I wanted to touch base with you on. Oh, the idea of joint accounts. I know we've talked about this before. Is there anything we need to do if we're on joint accounts and joint credit cards with a person we're going to be divorcing? What needs to do or what can we do at that point?
Sure. Yeah. So different people do things differently. So I've seen some couples maintain that joined finances sort of until the divorce, at which point they separate everything. Other couples, maybe the divorce is taking a while, or they've already had a lot of conflict around finances. And so what will happen then is they will choose to separate those finances early,
Right.
just to kind of, they're like, well, I don't like how you're spending. Well, maybe you don't like how I'm spending, so it can sort of reduce some of that conflict. One thing to note is about credit cards. So I know when I got tripped up by this when I was experiencing my own divorce, I thought, well, all our credit cards are joint, no problems. It turns out that most credit cards are not truly joint. There's generally, the primary card holder, and then there's someone called the authorized user. And so the primary card holder, basically has a lot more rights and responsibilities than the authorized user. So it turns out if, like I said, sometimes things blow up really suddenly. If you're just that authorized user, and your spouse is the primary card holder, they could actually call all those credit cards and get you removed as the authorized user. And so suddenly you have no access,
Yes.
um, to any kind of credit. So I always recommend if you don't have a credit card where you are the number one and you are the primary card holder, just go get one of those right now. One
Yeah.
of the nice things is that you can use your joint income because technically you're still married. So you just use that joint income. It can help you get approved for a little bit more. Always use credit responsibly. I always recommend paying off those cards immediately each month, but just have access to that credit in case you need it.
And I was going to say one other interesting thing that I've seen come up several times on this. Even if you have your own credit cards, if your spouse has a temper and is a little bit vindictive and a little bit nasty about the way they deal with things, call your credit card companies and put a PIN or some kind of identification on the card or some kind of code word you've got to use and let the credit card companies know that you are concerned that your spouse is going to call in and try to cancel your cards on you. I have had so many people say that their spouse called up and said, my wife just had her credit cards or my husband just had his credit card stolen. And look, he can't or she can't come to the phone right now. We just want these canceled or lock them up or whatever. And the credit card companies, they don't know what's going on. So they're likely to agree with it. Or I've had people have their new girlfriend call in and say they're the person, the card holder, and cancel the cards. So lock those cards up, put some kind of extra level of security, whether it's like two-factor authentication or something, so that somebody can't fraudulently cancel your cards, even if they belong just to you.
Oh, Marty, yeah, that is a really good point. I also say the problem is, if your spouse is willing to, sort of go low and be mean and nasty, they know your birthday. They probably know your social security number. They know your
Right.
address, right? They know all this information. That means that they can probably obtain loans, credit cards, things like that in your name that you don't even know about and maybe run up charges. So if you're worried that that's even a possibility, you can go to that again, that annualcreditreport.com and go to the three credit reporting bureaus and put what's called a freeze on your credit.
Right.
That means that basically no additional cards or loans can be taken out in your name. You may, need to lift that at some point in the future. Maybe you buy
Sure.
a house and want to get a mortgage, or you want to get that new credit card. You will have to lift that eventually. But for a while, you can put that on, and then that way they can't open anything up or take any loans out in your name, without your knowledge and consent.
And it's just peace of mind. And again, if you're not dealing with a difficult spouse and things are fairly amicable and this isn't something that you have any concerns about, don't worry about it. But if you are going through and you are concerned about what shenanigans might be going on in the background, there are really practical ways that you can protect yourself. So great. Thank you for this, Sue. I think that's really helpful too. What else? Is there another practical step that you would recommend people do?
Sure. A lot of times, I think in the midst of a divorce, there can be just a lot of anxiety or fear around money. So I've seen a lot of clients experience this, and I experienced it myself when I was walking through divorce. I was the lower earning spouse, and I thought, oh no, how are things going to work? I really need out of this marriage, but I'm stressed. How can I support, make sure my kids and I are going to be financially okay? And so one of the things I started doing was I actually started budgeting. So I downloaded a bunch of different budgeting apps and I'd try one out and I'd be like, oh, I hate this thing. Okay, next one. And eventually I did find an app that really worked well for me. Like I said, it took a bit of time. It took some effort. It took some setup. I had to watch some videos. But I will tell you, nothing has given me peace of mind like having that app. And so I happen to use, I'm not affiliated. I don't get any sponsorship deals from this, but I happen to use YNAB. It's You Need a Budget, YNAB.
Yes.
And yeah, and so that has worked really well for me. And it's helped me, you know, basically I started while we were still together, just tracking expenses, realizing about how much do we need for groceries, utilities. Now I knew once I moved, those numbers would shift a little bit, but I had some really good ballpark numbers on, how much it costs just to sort of live and exist with my three children. And that really gave me a lot of peace of mind in terms of when you have to, decide at the, am I going to accept this offer? Am I going to reject it? Am I going to ask for more? What do I do?
Right.
And to answer that question, I would say, well, I just need to know how much money do I need just from month to month to generally exist. And I have that data right at my fingertips. And oftentimes with clients who have those numbers, they can feel a lot more confident going forward.
Yeah, and I like the idea of an app, and I also like the idea that you can even just if you're not an app person, you can just do like create a basic spreadsheet and just put the numbers in, or heaven forbid, you can do it the good old fashioned pen and paper way. The problem with the paper and the spreadsheet is it's a little hard to shift the numbers. And if you want to try different scenarios, it's not as convenient. Whereas some of the apps, they have some great, like they'll project out if I put $10 a month in my savings account, what's that going to look like 10 years from now? Like it's got all that kind of extra cool little features that you can play around with. So that's a great idea, Sue. Any other last things that you're thinking that's something we really need to talk about today? We've covered a lot of stuff and I think this is all very practical. So thank you for this.
Sure. Yeah, I think I've seen sometimes, and I'll just talk a little bit about retirement accounts. So there's a wide variety of retirement accounts. There's, 401ks, IRAs, there'll be pension. One person, each person will decide, well, I'll keep my retirement accounts and you keep your retirement accounts. And then, everything will be equal. And it turns out actually, maybe, but maybe not.
Right.
You want to be open to looking at, are these accounts pre-tax? That's what we call traditional retirement accounts, or are they post-tax? Those are usually called Roth accounts, like Roth IRA, Roth 401k. And make sure you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges when we're thinking about money in those retirement accounts. But just to know in most states, if it's something that you were acquired or were saving into during marriage, that's a marital asset, or at least part of it is a marital asset. And it does need to be, divided in the divorce.
Yeah. And another thing about those accounts, if I'm not mistaken, whatever it says in your divorce decree, that's not enough. You have to go get what's called a quadro qualified domestic relations order that is then given to the manager of that fund. And then he or she actually does the disbursement out of it. And somebody's got to pay for that typically quadro attorney. So that might be another couple $1,000s on an expense that you need to think about if your attorney can't handle it or doesn't handle it.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people think, aha, the divorce decree is signed. I am done. Unfortunately, the signing of that decree doesn't actually cause the money to be moved into an account in your own name. And so that's where things get tricky. So if it's in an IRA or individual retirement account, generally a signed copy of the divorce decree is all that's needed for the administrator of that account. So it could be like Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, Betterment, wherever it's held. And they can take that copy of the divorce decree and they'll, often take that part of that money and move it into an account in your own name. However, it's a 401k or a pension plan, something like that, or 403b. There's a whole alphabet soup of retirement accounts, depending if you're a government worker, a private sector worker. And in that case, you often do need that quadro qualified domestic relations order. And another problem I've seen is sometimes people, they're just, I think, exhausted after the divorce. And they don't necessarily follow up and get those quadros written and executed. So in cases that I work on, I like to have those submitted the same time as the judgment, get the quadros signed by the judge right away and executed. Because I've seen cases where, they were divorced 10 years ago. The quadros weren't executed. Maybe, your former spouse passes away.
Yeah.
Now what? You're trying to get money from their estate. I mean, it just gets ugly. Or maybe they have a spending problem or a gambling problem. Maybe the money's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
very true. So you have, I mean, I think these are and there's probably a lot more. So we may have to have you come back and talk about some more. But I think these are really, really good steps. And I like the detail and the clear explanations as always, because I think the more people have an understanding of this, the more that they can be fully prepared to work with their CDFA, work with their attorney, work with their partner, whoever it may be during this divorce. So if people do want to find out more about what you do, what is the best way to reach you?
sure, if they just go to my website, which is resilient divorce solutions, so plural.com, and there people can sign up for a free 30-minute consultation. I also have a free download, 10 financial mistakes to avoid during divorce. And so those are available free of charge to anyone who's experiencing a divorce.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sue. I so appreciate this. And thank you for sharing your expertise and wisdom today.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me on, Marty.
You are welcome. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave your comments in the chat, and we will be checking back and answering any questions you may have.